They thought I'd never find out the real truth about who was really keeping them afloat for 6 agonizing months. But the universe has a funny, often brutally direct way of exposing lies, especially the kind that are wrapped in designer scarves and crocodile tears. My name is Sophie Hayes. I'm 28 and I'm a graphic designer at a small, unassuming marketing company. For half a year, I'd been the silent benefactor, the invisible financial IV drip for my own parents. I achieved this by meticulously, painfully tightening my own budget until it screamed for mercy. No more takeout, no new clothes, nursing the same old laptop that sounded like a jet engine. My other, perhaps greater achievement, I persevered. I clawed my way towards the truth and dragged it kicking and screaming into the light, even when my own family, the people who were supposed to believe me, didn't. Even when technology betrayed me at the worst possible moment, and the emotional distress felt like a physical weight crushing my chest. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have fathomed in my wildest nightmares, was that my own sister, Olivia, the perennial golden child, was meticulously, diabolically crafting an entirely false narrative. A narrative that painted her as the selfless, sacrificing savior, and me as a bitter, jealous, delusional liar. The truth I eventually unearthed wasn't just about stolen credit for money I'd bled for. It was about a lifetime of carefully constructed deception, a masterclass in manipulation, and the bone-chillingly painful reality of where I truly stood, or rather, didn't stand, in the eyes of my own family. If you've ever been the overlooked one, the quiet workhorse whose efforts are consistently and systematically rendered invisible while someone else basks in unearned stolen glory, then do me a favor. Comment, "I see you" below and hit that subscribe button because you're going to feel every single gut-wrenching, fist-clenching moment of this. Trust me, if you're sick to death of watching manipulators get away with it, if you lie awake at night dreaming of the day the carefully polished facade finally shatters and the truth explodes like a firework, this story will give you the cathartic vindication you've been desperately craving. I'm about to tell you exactly how one disastrous Christmas dinner turned into the most satisfying, karma-drenched truth-telling showdown of my entire life. Growing up in the Hayes household, I was for all intents and purposes the wallpaper, pleasant, unassuming, and largely unnoticed. My older sister Olivia, however, was the chandelier, dazzling, impossible to ignore, the center of every room she graced. She was the one who effortlessly snagged scholarships without seeming to break a sweat, the one who always landed the lead roles in school plays. Even if her singing was a tad pitchy, it was deemed characterful, the one whose report cards were apparently printed on gold leaf paper. I was Sophie, the quiet observer in the corner, the diligent student whose hard-won A's were met with a distracted, "Oh, that's nice, dear," before the conversation inevitably magnetically swirled back to Olivia's latest spectacular triumph. I found my niche, my quiet passion in graphic design. I love the creativity, the precision, the ability to communicate without having to be the loudest voice in the room. But my steady, earnest job at a small local marketing firm, while fulfilling for me, was always going to look like a flickering candle next to the supernova of Olivia's role as an executive assistant at a huge, glitzy corporation in the city. She always had the better anecdotes, the more impressive-sounding connections, the life that seemed to effortlessly sparkle and shine. Our parents, Eleanor, a devoted homemaker whose life revolved around her family, and Robert, a recently retired factory worker, whose quiet demeanor often masked a stubborn adherence to his preconceived notions, weren't intentionally cruel people. I have to believe that. But their favoritism towards Olivia wasn't just a bias. It was an ingrained, immutable law of our family's universe. It was the constant, subtle, yet undeniably present hum beneath the surface of our daily lives, as predictable and pervasive as the scent of Mum's Sunday roast or Dad's grumbling about the weather. Olivia, in their eyes, could do no wrong. If she made a mistake, it was a charming quirk. If I made a similar mistake, it was a concerning lack of attention to detail, Sophie. and Olivia. She played this dynamic like a virtuoso conducting a renowned orchestra. She knew with an almost chilling certainty that whatever narrative she chose to spin, however outlandish or self-serving, our parents would accept it as unshakable, irrefutable gospel. Her word was bond. Mine was apparently written in erasable ink. The particular injustice that finally caused me to snap the one that led to the Christmas cataclysm wasn't a sudden, unexpected storm. Oh no, it was the inevitable, destructive culmination of a lifelong, relentless drizzle of slights, dismissals, and carefully curated realities that always left me on the outside looking in. The first real blood-red flag, though I was too conditioned, too naively hopeful to recognize its full, insidious color at the time, appeared around early June of that fateful year. Olivia called me, her voice artfully laced with that manufactured, Oscar-worthy concern she deployed with such devastating effectiveness. "Soph, darling." She'd sighed, the sound crackling slightly over the phone line. "I'm just so worried about Mum and Dad. Terribly worried." "Oh," I'd responded, my own anxieties immediately pricking up. "Why, what's wrong?" "Well," she continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "I was over there the other day and I overheard Dad on the phone with the bank. And then Mum was looking through a pile of bills with this awful stressed look on her face. Things are really, really tight for them, Soph. Bills piling up. I honestly think it's going to get properly tough soon. Like can't make ends meet tough." She painted a vivid, bleak picture of impending financial doom, her tone dripping with a carefully measured blend of filial piety and helpless distress. Yet, and this should have been the clanging alarm bell, she never once, not for a single breath, mentioned offering any practical financial help herself. No, Olivia's role was to be the concerned observer, the one who wrung her hands prettily while someone else guessed who was expected to actually do the dirty work. That little seed of worry she so skillfully planted in my mind, it didn't just take root. It burrowed deep, sprouting an immediate, urgent sense of responsibility. I loved my parents despite the ingrained inequities of our family dynamic. The thought of them genuinely struggling, of them losing sleep over bills, gnawed at me relentlessly. So I did what I always seemed to do. I quietly, without fanfare, found a solution. I sat down with my spreadsheets, my bank statements, my already modest budget, and I performed financial surgery. I trimmed, I slashed, I reallocated. My small, cherished luxuries, the artisan coffee that kick-started my mornings, the new set of drawing pens I'd been eyeing, the slow-drip savings for a desperately needed new laptop, were all unceremoniously axed. It was more than tight. It was constricting, a financial straitjacket that left me gasping for air some weeks. But by the beginning of July, I had managed to free up a respectable sum enough to make a difference, and I made the first transfer to their joint account. I continued to do so like clockwork on the first of every month thereafter: August, September, October, November, December. 6 months of silent sacrifice. I never told them it was me. Why? A complicated cocktail of reasons, I suppose. Part of it was an ingrained humility, a learned behavior from years of not having my efforts acknowledged anyway. Part of it was a genuine, if perhaps misguided, desire not to make them feel uncomfortable or indebted. And yes, a foolish, embarrassingly naive part of me clung to the hope that they'd somehow just know, or that the visible relief on their faces, the easing of that worry I'd seen, etched there before, would be reward enough. Little did I know that my silence was creating the perfect vacuum for Olivia's lies to flourish. The psychological impact of this charade was a slow, insidious erosion of my already fragile sense of self-worth. During my weekly, sometimes bi-weekly calls home, the misdirected praise for Olivia would inevitably, painfully surface, often directly, unknowingly to them, linked to my own unseen sacrifices. "Oh, Sophie, darling, you just wouldn't believe how wonderful your sister is." Mum would chirp, her voice bright and buoyant, usually a day or two after my latest transfer had cleared in their account. "Olivia sent us some money again this month. Out of the blue. She's just so incredibly thoughtful, so responsible, so caring. Not like..." And then she'd trail off, a slight, almost imperceptible frown, flitting across her face, a momentary dip in her vocal sunshine. And I knew, with a certainty, that twisted in my gut, the unspoken, crushing comparison, not like you, Sophie, who never seems to have anything extra, who isn't as successful or as generous as your amazing sister. Each time it was like a tiny sharp stone being thrown at a window that was already fractured. I'd swallow the lump of hurt in my throat, murmur something non-committal and bland like, "Oh, that's nice of her," and then hastily, desperately change the subject. I'd convinced myself, or perhaps Olivia had subtly convinced me, that making a fuss, that claiming my due would be unseemly selfish, that their well-being and peace of mind were paramount, even at the expense of my own truth. Olivia, when I'd once very cautiously broached the subject with her, had waved a dismissive, manicured hand. "Oh, you know, Soph," she'd said with an airy, patronizing lightness. "Bits and pieces when I can. A little something here and there. Don't you worry your little head about the grown-up stuff. I've pretty much got it covered." She implied with masterful vagueness that she was the strategic mastermind behind their financial rescue, perhaps making larger, more significant contributions that dwarfed my own humble offerings. I, ever the naive optimist when it came to hoping for the best in my sister, actually foolishly assumed she meant she was contributing something, anything at all. My cousin Nina Petrovic, a straight-talking, fiercely loyal preschool teacher with a built-in bullshit detector and a heart of pure gold, was perhaps the only person in our extended family who occasionally raised a skeptical eyebrow at Olivia's grandiose pronouncements and carefully curated image. Nina had an uncanny knack for seeing through facades, for sensing the hollowness beneath the shine. "Olivia sure does talk a big game, doesn't she?" She'd once remarked to me privately after a particularly nauseating family gathering, where Olivia had held court for an hour, detailing the immense pressures of her demanding job and dropping heavy-handed hints about her own magnanimous generosity towards various unnamed causes, which we were of course meant to assume included our parents. But Soph, be honest, does she ever actually do anything concrete, or is it all just a really good performance? At the time, shamefully, I'd leap to Olivia's defense, a conditioned reflex born of years of trying to maintain a fragile family peace. "Oh, Nina, she means well," I'd mumbled, feeling like a traitor to my own quiet knowledge. As the festive season approached, Olivia's performance of the dutiful, self-sacrificing daughter of the year reached truly operatic new heights. Just a few days before Christmas Eve, Mum was idly browsing online and mentioned a rather expensive, beautifully tailored wool coat she'd seen that Olivia had admired weeks earlier. "I was thinking of getting it for her for Christmas, Robert," Mum had said to Dad, her eyes shining with anticipated pleasure. I was present helping Mum wrap other smaller gifts. Olivia, who had just breezed in perfectly timed as always, overheard. She immediately adopted an expression of profound saintly self-denial, placing a delicate hand on Mum's arm. "Oh, Mum, no, please." She'd set her voice a masterpiece of gentle refusal. "It's absolutely beautiful, truly, and so thoughtful of you, but I really, really can't accept it. I'm saving every single penny I can to help you and Dad out, with things being so tight. I simply can't afford to spend money recklessly on myself right now, not when you two need support." Mum and Dad had exchanged proud, misty-eyed glances over Olivia's bowed head. My mother had even reached out to pat Olivia's hair. I felt a tight, ugly knot of something hot and bitter twist in my stomach. It wasn't just the blatant, audacious lie. It was the sheer, effortless ease with which she delivered it, the way she visibly basked in their unearned, misdirected adoration, an adoration built entirely on my sacrifice, my scrimping, my silent struggle. My long-standing coping mechanism had always been to retreat, to pour myself into my work to find validation in my own skills, in the quiet, tangible satisfaction of a design well executed, a client happy. I kept telling myself, like a mantra, that actions spoke louder than words, that eventually, inevitably, the truth of my sustained efforts would be seen, would be recognized, would somehow just emerge. But the constant, unacknowledged burden of those monthly payments, coupled with the daily grating injustice of the misdirected praise and adulation being heaped upon Olivia, was becoming heavier than I could bear. It was a suffocating weight, the final straw, the tiny, seemingly insignificant incident that would finally shatter my decades of carefully constructed silence and ignite the inferno that had been smoldering within me for years, was just around the corner, innocently disguised as Christmas Eve. I had absolutely no idea, not an inkling, of the emotional hurricane that was about to break. And break it did. Christmas Eve at the Hayes family home had always been a meticulously orchestrated production, a command performance of perfect familial bliss, usually directed with an iron fist in a velvet glove by my mother Eleanor, with Olivia naturally in the leading spotlight hogging role. This particular year, the ever-present undercurrent of financial strain, a strain which I and only I knew I was actively significantly alleviating, added an extra layer of forced brittle cheer that felt particularly suffocating. The air was thick and heavy with the cloying scent of pine needles from the perfectly decorated tree, the rich aroma of roasting turkey already promising a feast for the next day, but it was also charged with unspoken tensions, a simmering resentment I was only just beginning to truly comprehend the depth of. After the early evening meal, a surprisingly subdued affair, we all congregated in the living room. The Christmas lights twinkled with an almost aggressive cheerfulness, casting dancing shadows on the walls, creating an illusion of warmth and bonhomie that felt utterly at odds with the turmoil brewing inside me. It was Mum who lit the fuse. "Robert, darling," she began, her voice brimming with a carefully rehearsed yet genuinely felt emotion as she turned to my father, then beamed at my sister, who practically glowed under the anticipated attention. "Before the night gets away from us, we really must thank Olivia properly, publicly. She's been an absolute unmitigated angel to us these past 6 months. Olivia," ever the actress, dabbed at the corner of her eyes with a delicate lace-trimmed handkerchief she just happened to have clutched in her hand. "That extra money she's been so generously sending through every month. Well, darling, it's been nothing short of a lifesaver. Truly. I honestly don't know what we would have done without you, sweetheart. You've taken such a weight off our minds," Olivia sniffled prettily. "Oh, Mum, Dad," she warbled, her voice thick with a nauseating concoction of fake humility and martyred self-importance. "It was nothing, really. You've both done so much for me over the years. It was the least I could do. I just wanted to help in any way I could. It's been a bit of a stretch, of course, juggling everything with my own expenses, being what they are, but family always comes first, doesn't it?" She cast a beatific, almost saintly smile around the room. That was it. The snap. I felt something cold and hard inside me, something that had been compressed for years finally irrevocably break. I couldn't stay silent. Not anymore. The carefully constructed dam of my patience, eroded by months of thankless sacrifice and years of being overlooked, finally burst. "Actually, Mum, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly calm, cutting through Olivia's saccharine performance with the precision of a scalpel. "Olivia hasn't been sending you any money. I have." The festive atmosphere in the room didn't just shatter, it imploded. Mum's adoring smile froze mid-beam, then twisted into an expression of utter disbelief, rapidly morphing into a familiar flush of protective anger on Olivia's behalf. Olivia gasped a theatrical hand-to-bosom gesture as if I'd physically struck her with a poisoned dart. "Sophie Hayes," Mum snapped, her voice rising sharp and accusatory, instantly on the defensive, for her golden girl. Don't you dare try to steal your sister's credit. How could you be so cruel, so vindictive, so breathtakingly jealous on Christmas Eve of all nights? What is wrong with you?" This was injustice. Example 1 hitting me full force, the immediate aggressive shutdown, the refusal to even entertain the possibility that I might be telling the truth. "But it's the truth, Mum," I insisted, my heart starting to pound a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The adrenaline was kicking in. "I've been making monthly transfers to your account since July. I have proof. I can show you my bank statements right now." Olivia, seizing her cue, burst into dramatic heaving sobs. I just can't believe this," she cried, turning to our parents with wide, wounded, glistening eyes. "After everything I've done, everything I've sacrificed, every penny I've scraped together for you. Sophie, how could you? Why are you always trying to undermine me to make me look bad?" "I'm not trying to undermine you, Olivia," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady to project a calm I didn't feel. "I'm simply telling the truth." I fumbled for my phone, my hands trembling slightly, the smooth casing suddenly slippery in my grip. "Look, I can show you the transactions. They're all there on my banking app." But then, in a moment of cosmic perversity that I still can't quite believe, the universe decided to deliver a cruel, perfectly timed punchline. As I tapped the banking app icon, a dreaded persistent error message flashed onto the screen. "System unavailable. We are currently experiencing unexpected technical difficulties, and all online and mobile banking services are temporarily down. Please try again later." I tapped again, and again. Same infuriating message. A cold, sickening dread began to seep into my bones, chilling me from the inside out. This couldn't be happening. Not now. "Oh, look at that." Olivia sneered, her tears miraculously, drying up with the speed of a desert flash flood. Her recovery was astonishingly swift. "Her irrefutable proof seems to have mysteriously vanished. How terribly convenient for you, Sophie." She then, with a flourish that would have done a stage magician proud, reached into her expensive leather handbag and pulled out a neat sheaf of papers. Unlike Sophie and her suddenly shy little banking app and her wild imaginary evidence, she announced, her voice dripping with venomous triumph. "I, as it happens, came prepared. I had a horrible feeling she might try to pull some desperate attention-seeking stunt like this tonight. She's always been so terribly transparently envious of anything good that happens to me." She handed a set of professionally printed, official-looking PDF documents to our parents. "These, Mum, Dad, are my bank transfer confirmations, clearly showing monthly transfers from my account to your account, every single month, for the last 6 months. The dates, the amounts, everything is there in black and white." My parents, their faces a mixture of relief that Olivia was vindicated and deepening disappointment in me poured over them. To a casual, trusting eye, they looked legitimate. Official bank logos, plausible-looking transaction IDs, correct dates, the amounts Mum had gushed about. My stomach churned with a nauseous certainty. They were fakes. They had to be. But how in this moment, with my own proof inaccessible, could I possibly convince them this was injustice? Example 2, the unquestioning acceptance of Olivia's faked proof, cementing their belief in her honesty, and my supposed malicious deceit, especially after my own technology had so spectacularly failed me. "Well, Sophie," Dad said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble of disappointment and barely suppressed anger. He was a man of few words, my father, but his disapproval when it came cut deeper and more painfully than Mum's more frequent, more theatrical histrionics. He looked from the damning faked PDFs in his hand to my blank, useless phone screen, then back to my face, his expression hardening. "Your sister, it seems, has concrete proof. What do you have to offer? Nothing but baseless accusations and a conveniently broken app. Dad, those PDFs, they can be faked so easily," I pleaded, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. "Please, just let me. Maybe the bank's main website will work on my laptop, or perhaps the system will be back online in a little while." "Enough," Eleanor, my mother, cried out, her face flushed, her eyes blazing with righteous indignation on Olivia's behalf. "I've heard quite enough of your vicious lies and your pathetic attempts to hurt your sister Sophie. You're just trying to ruin Christmas for everyone because you simply can't stand to see Olivia being appreciated for her kindness and generosity." Dad stood up then, his tall frame seeming to fill the room, his face grim and set in lines of implacable judgment. "Sophie," he said, his voice heavy with a chilling finality that terrified me to my core, "you will apologize to your sister immediately for this disgusting, unwarranted display of jealousy and malice. And then you will apologize to your mother and me for trying to deceive us, for attempting to spoil our Christmas with your fabrications. If you do not, and I mean this, Sophie, you can pack your bags and leave this house. Tonight. We will not have this kind of insidious, hateful toxicity under our roof, especially not at Christmas. This was injustice, example 3, his brutal ultimatum, effectively choosing to believe the elaborate lie and punishing me, his own daughter, for daring to tell the truth. I stared at him, my world tilting, a dizzying nausea washing over me. Apologize. Apologize for telling the gods honest truth, for being the one who had actually genuinely helped them, month after painstaking month. The sheer, crushing injustice of it was a physical blow knocking the air from my lungs. Hot, furious tears welled in my eyes, blurring the sight of their accusing face. Olivia, I noticed through my haze of disbelief, watched me with a small, almost imperceptible, yet utterly triumphant smirk playing on her lips. She had won. Again. "I won't apologize," I said, my voice trembling but somehow miraculously firm. "I won't apologize for something I didn't do, and I will never apologize for telling the truth, even if none of you are willing to believe it." "Then get out," Dad said, his voice flat, devoid of any discernible emotion, which was somehow worse than outright anger. "Get out of my house. Now." My mother, her face a mask of stony disapproval, turned her back on me, physically dismissing my presence. Olivia just looked down, feigning a delicate sorrow, probably to hide her elation. In that moment, I felt utterly, devastatingly alone. Disbelieved, discarded, betrayed by my entire immediate family. This was it. This was my absolute lowest point. Kicked out of my own family home on Christmas Eve, branded a liar, a troublemaker, a jealous shrew, while the real deceiver, the architect of this whole nightmare, was being comforted, coddled, and praised. The festive, twinkling Christmas lights suddenly seemed to mock me with their cheerful, indifferent glow. Wordlessly, a cold numbness settling over my shock, I turned, grabbed my coat from the hallway and my handbag from the sofa, and walked out into the cold, dark, unforgiving night. The sound of the front door slamming shut behind me echoed in the sudden silence, sharp and final, like a gunshot severing the last thread of my belonging. The biting, frosty December air hit my face like a physical slap, a stark, unwelcome contrast to the suffocating, emotionally charged warmth I'd just been so unceremoniously expelled from. I managed to get into my small beat-up car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel, let alone insert the key into the ignition. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and unstoppable, blurring the streetlights into streaks of indifferent light. Where could I possibly go? What on earth was I supposed to do? The injustice of it all burned in my chest, a raging, uncontrollable fire of incandescent anger, profound hurt, and sheer bewildered disbelief. I drove aimlessly for what felt like an eternity, the relentlessly cheerful Christmas carols crooning from the radio, feeling like a personal, cruel taunt, each jolly note a fresh stab of pain. Eventually, an hour or so later, my fuel light blinking ominously, I found myself parked outside a brightly lit, soulless 24-hour coffee shop on the outskirts of town. It seemed to be the only establishment open and awake, its fluorescent glow, a beacon that somehow mirrored the desolate, empty state of my soul. I needed proof. I desperately needed to show them, to wipe those smug, disbelieving looks off their faces. I pulled out my phone again, my heart hammering with a mixture of dread and a tiny flickering ember of hope. Praying, begging the universe for a tiny Christmas miracle, I tried the banking app again. Error. System still unavailable. My stomach plummeted. I frantically tried the bank's mobile website. Same infuriating, soul-crushing message. A wave of utter, complete hopelessness washed over me, so potent it almost made me physically sick. It truly felt like every single force in the cosmos was actively conspiring against me, meticulously ensuring Olivia's flawless victory and my utter annihilation. I slumped over the steering wheel, the cheap plastic cold against my forehead, and finally let the sobs rack my body. Deep, ragged, despairing gasps for air. Was this it? Was this how my story ended? Was Olivia just going to get away with this monumental, soul-destroying deception? Was I truly destined to be the villain, the outcast in my own family's carefully rewritten history? Another hour crawled by. I was nursing a lukewarm, bitter coffee inside the nearly empty shop, trying to formulate some semblance of a plan. A cheap, anonymous motel for the night. Try to sleep hunched over in my car, shivering in the freezing temperatures. My phone, lying accusingly silent on the table beside my coffee cup, suddenly buzzed, making me jump. A text message. My heart leaped, then sank. Probably Olivia with some parting shot of venom, or Mum with another lecture. With trepidation, I picked it up. It was from Nina. My cousin Nina. Solid, sensible, no-nonsense Nina. The message read, "Hey, Soph. Just heard through the parental grapevine Mum called my mum. You know how Aunt Carol loves to gossip that things apparently went nuclear over at your folks' place tonight. Are you okay? Seriously, where are you right now? Look, if you need a place to crash, my spare room is all yours. No questions asked. No judgment, just a comfy bed and a strong cup of tea. Don't worry about a thing. Come over whenever. And Soph, for what it's worth, I've always thought you were a straight shooter. Olivia, on the other hand, well, let's just say her stories sometimes have more glitter than gold. Call me." Tears pricked my eyes again, but this time they were tears of relief, of gratitude. A tiny, fragile seedling of hope pushed its way through the permafrost of my despair. Nina, of course. She hadn't been there tonight. She was spending Christmas Eve with her partner's family, but she knew Olivia. She knew me. That casual, almost throwaway line, "Her stories sometimes have more glitter than gold," was more validation than I'd received from my own parents in years. It was a lifeline, a small, flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness. I typed a shaky, "Thank you," on my way. And for the first time in hours, I felt a minuscule shift inside me. I wasn't entirely alone. Maybe, just maybe, this nightmare wasn't over yet. The stakes were impossibly high. I was effectively homeless on Christmas Eve. My reputation with my parents was in tatters. My heart was shattered into a million pieces. But Nina's message gave me the tiniest sliver of strength to even consider fighting back. The drive to Nina's small, cozy terraced house on the other side of town felt like crossing into a different dimension. Her street was quiet, adorned with cheerful, unpretentious Christmas lights that, unlike the ones at my parents' house, didn't feel mocking. Nina greeted me at the door with a warm, comforting hug that spoke volumes, ushering me into her brightly lit kitchen where a kettle was already whistling. She didn't press for details immediately, just made me a strong, sweet tea, wrapped a soft blanket around my shoulders, and let me sit in silence for a while, the shock still rendering me mostly mute. It was late, well past midnight, officially Christmas morning. As I sat there cradling the warm mug, the events of the evening replayed in my mind like a horror film. The banking app. That goddamn banking app. I pulled out my phone again, almost compulsively. "Still down?" Nina asked gently, seeing the familiar frustration on my face. I nodded, defeated. "It's like the universe is personally trying to screw me over, Nina. There's a major system-wide outage. My one piece of tangible proof, and it's completely inaccessible. ATMs are probably down too. Olivia must be laughing her head off. She wins. She always wins." "Don't say that, Soph," Nina said firmly, her usual forthrightness a welcome antidote to my spiraling despair. She sat opposite me at her small kitchen table. "Don't you dare give up that easily. I saw your face when you told me about this whole money thing a few months back, how you were cutting back. You're not a liar, Sophie. And Olivia, well, Olivia has always been incredibly skilled at making Olivia look good, hasn't she? There has to be another way to prove it. Think. There has to be." Her belief, even if it was just a sliver, was like a splash of cold water. But my mind felt like sludge. "What other way is there, Nina?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Her fake PDFs looked convincing enough for Mum and Dad. They wanted to believe her. They always want to believe her. Without my bank statements, it's my word against hers, and we both know whose word carries more weight in that house. I felt a fresh wave of hopelessness threaten to drown me. I told Nina I might as well just give up, let Olivia have her victory. My parents would never believe me over their precious golden child, not without something absolutely irrefutable. Nina listened patiently, then leaned forward, her gaze intense. "No, don't you let her win, Sophie. Not this time. This isn't just about money, is it? It's about truth. It's about them finally seeing you. You are an honest person, Soph. You are kind. You sacrificed for them. The truth has a way of coming out, but sometimes it needs a damn good push. Don't let that lying, manipulative witch," she amended, though I could tell she wanted to use stronger words, "get away with this. There must be something else. Banks are meticulous. They have records for everything." Her words, "Banks are meticulous, Mom," echoed in my head. Records for everything. And then it hit me. Like a lightning bolt out of a clear blue sky, a sudden electrifying jolt that shot through my despair and exhaustion. "Oh my God," I whispered, my eyes widening. "Oh my God. Nina. The emails." Nina looked at me puzzled. "Emails? What emails?" "My bank," I practically shouted, scrambling for my phone again, but this time not for the useless app. My bank sends automatic email confirmations for every financial transfer I make. Every single one. I have them set up to go to my personal email. I never delete them. They must be there, all 6 months of them. My fingers flew across the screen, my heart pounding with a wild, desperate hope. I opened my email app, typed bank transfer confirmation and my bank's name into the search bar. The screen refreshed, and there they were, a neat chronological list. July 1st, transfer confirmation. Hayes joint account. August 1st, transfer confirmation. Hayes joint account. September 1st, transfer confirmation. Hayes joint account. October 1st, transfer confirmation. Hayes joint account. November 1st, transfer confirmation. Hayes joint account. December 1st, transfer confirmation. Hayes joint account. I clicked on one, then another. Each email was an official communication from my bank, complete with their logo, security information, and all the crucial details: the date of transfer, the exact amount transferred, matching the figures Mum had mentioned. Olivia sent the recipient account name, Mr. R. and Mrs. E. Hayes joint account, and most importantly, the last 4 digits of the recipient account number, my parents' account number. It was all there, irrefutable, undeniable, unfakeable. This was it. This was my turning point. The evidence Olivia couldn't deny, couldn't wriggle out of. The evidence that didn't rely on a faulty app or a system outage. "Look!" I shoved my phone under Nina's nose, tears of a different kind now streaming down my face. Tears of overwhelming relief, of burgeoning triumph. "Look at this. It's all here. 6 months of proof." Nina scrolled through them, a slow, wide smile spreading across her face. "Well, I'll be damned," she breathed. "Sophie Hayes, you absolute genius. This is it. This is your silver bullet." She looked up at me, her eyes shining. "Olivia is going to have a very, very bad Christmas Day." A new feeling began to surge through me, pushing aside the despair and hurt. It was a cold, hard, righteous anger, but it was accompanied by a fierce, electrifying determination. Olivia had underestimated me. She'd relied on our parents' ingrained bias, on my history of quiet acquiescence, on a convenient technological failure. She thought she was untouchable. She was wrong. "She's not just going to have a bad Christmas Day, Nina," I said, my voice low and steady, a newfound resolve hardening my gaze. "She's going to have the Christmas Day she deserves. The whole family will be there for dinner tomorrow. Aunts, uncles, cousins, the whole damn clan. They all heard Mum and Dad praising Olivia tonight. I'm sure the news of my jealous outburst and disgraceful exit has already made the rounds thanks to Aunt Carol's efficiency." I felt a grim smile touch my lips. Well, they're all going to witness the sequel, the one where the truth finally gets its moment in the spotlight. My decision was made. I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to expose Olivia's deception in the most public, undeniable way possible. My revenge strategy began to form. I would wait. I would let Olivia bask in her stolen glory at the Christmas dinner. I would let her dig her own grave with more sanctimonious pronouncements. And then when the moment was right, when the entire audience was assembled, I would present my irrefutable email confirmations. And for the final knockout blow, I would challenge Olivia and our parents to verify the deposits right there and then via our parents' own bank statements or even an ATM receipt if systems were still patchy for apps. Their own bank records would show the originating account numbers for those deposits, and those numbers would trace straight back to me. Olivia's true nature, her calculated cruelty, and breathtaking arrogance was now fully, starkly revealed to me. She hadn't just lied. She had meticulously planned this, faking documents ready to discredit me. She had been so confident, so overconfident in her ability to manipulate everyone, so sure of my inability to fight back. That was her mistake, her biggest mistake. I was no longer the quiet, defeated Sophie. I was armed with the truth, and I was ready for war. Christmas Day couldn't come soon enough. Christmas Day dawned cold and gray, mirroring the mood in my heart, though a steely resolve now overlaid the lingering pain. Nina was a rock, her quiet, unwavering support a balm to my frayed nerves. We spent the morning strategizing, printing out multiple copies of the bank emails, highlighting the key details, dates, amounts, recipient account information, and my name clearly visible as the sender's account holder on the email source. I felt like a lawyer preparing for a high-stakes trial. By early afternoon, armed with my folder of evidence and Nina by my side for moral support, she decided to accompany me. Bless her, we drove to my parents' house. The usual cacophony of a large family gathering greeted us as we stepped inside. Aunts chattering, uncles debating football, cousins chasing each other. The air was thick with the aroma of roast turkey, sage, and onion stuffing, and a simmering, unspoken tension that seemed to center around me the moment I walked in. I saw the curious pitying, and in some cases condemnatory glances from various relatives. Clearly, Olivia and my parents had done a thorough job of painting me as the Christmas Eve villain. Good. Let them think what they wanted. For now. Olivia was as expected, holding court in the center of the living room, looking radiant in a new cashmere sweater, no doubt purchased with money she hadn't actually saved. She was regaling a captive audience of aunts with a dramatic, tear-laced account of her terrible ordeal the previous night, how her own sister had tried to sabotage her happiness and steal her moment of recognition out of pure, unadulterated jealousy. Her performance was masterful, each gesture, each tremor in her voice perfectly calibrated for maximum sympathy. My stomach churned, but I kept my expression neutral, my gaze steady. Dinner was a strained affair. I sat mostly in silence, picking at my food, acutely aware of the sideways glances and whispered comments. Olivia, on the other hand, was positively blooming, basking in the renewed waves of sympathy and admiration her earlier performance had generated. My parents particularly, Mum kept shooting me looks that were a painful cocktail of disappointment and weary exasperation. Dad just looked grim and avoided my eye. Then as coffee and dessert were being served, Mum cleared her throat, tapping her glass for attention. "Before we have dessert," she announced, her voice filled with emotion, "I just want to say again, on behalf of Robert and myself, how incredibly grateful we are to our darling Olivia." She beamed at my sister. "These past 6 months, well, you've been our rock sweetheart. Your generosity, your sacrifice, it hasn't gone unnoticed. We love you so much." Several relatives murmured appreciative ahs, and "she's such a good daughter." Olivia naturally lapped it up. She stood a picture of modest grace, tears welling in her eyes again. "Oh, Mom, Dad," she began, her voice trembling artfully. "It was truly my honor. As I said last night, family is everything, and while it broke my heart that some people—" Here she cast a swift, sorrowful glance in my direction, tried to cast doubt, and spread such awful, hurtful lies. "I know that you, my real family, understand the truth of my intentions. It was a struggle, a real sacrifice to manage those payments each month on top of my own commitments, but seeing you both less worried made it all worthwhile. This was it, my cue. The stage was set. The audience assembled. I stood up slowly, calmly, my folder of printed emails in my hand. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to me. I could feel Olivia stiffen, a flicker of something, annoyance, apprehension, crossing her face before she quickly schooled it back into an expression of pained forbearance. "Actually, Olivia," I said, my voice clear and carrying in the sudden silence, "you didn't sacrifice a single penny because you didn't send them any money, not 1 cent. A collective gasp went around the room. Olivia's face flushed a dangerous shade of red. "Sophie, how dare you?" She hissed, her voice losing its gentle tremor and gaining a sharp, venomous edge. "We went through all this last night. You have no proof. You're just a bitter, jealous liar trying to ruin another family occasion." "Oh, but I do have proof, Olivia," I replied, my voice still, even though my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Last night, my banking app was conveniently down, wasn't it? A system-wide outage. Such unfortunate timing for me, but banks, as you may or may not know, are meticulous record keepers, and they send email confirmations for every single transfer. I stepped forward and began to hand out copies of the emails to my parents and then to the nearest aunts and uncles. "These," I announced, "are official email confirmations from my bank sent to my email address for every single one of the 6 monthly payments made to Mum and Dad's joint account from July through to December. You'll see the dates, the exact amounts, and the recipient account details. Mr. R. and Mrs. E. Hayes' joint account with their account number." The room erupted into a low murmur of confusion and dawning shock. My parents stared at the papers in their hands, their faces paling. Olivia looked like she'd been slapped. Those can be faked," Olivia spluttered, her eyes darting around wildly, looking for an escape route. "She's a graphic designer. She could have mocked those up. She's trying to frame me." "They're official bank emails, Olivia," I said, meeting her panicked gaze without flinching. "Sent automatically time-stamped with security headers. Far harder to fake convincingly than, say, a simple PDF document which, as a highly competent executive assistant you'd know, can be created or altered by anyone with basic software." The power dynamic was shifting palpably. The whispers among the relatives grew louder. I saw expressions of doubt turning towards Olivia. My father, Robert, was staring intently at the email printout in his hand, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. He looked from the paper to me, then to Olivia, then back to the paper. The silence stretched thick and heavy. "The account numbers," he said slowly, his voice raspy. "The recipient account is ours, but the source, Sophie. These emails clearly state they originated from an account connected to your email address." "Exactly, Dad," I said. "And to remove any lingering doubt about the authenticity of these emails or the source of the funds, there's a very simple way to verify this isn't there." I turned to my parents. "You can check your own bank statements, the actual statements for your joint account. They will show the incoming deposits for each of those 6 months. And more importantly, they will show the originating account number for each of those deposits. Those numbers, I guarantee you, will trace back to my bank account, not Olivia's." "Oui, c'est ça, I then added, looking directly at Olivia, whose face was now ashen. "Or if the online systems are still a bit unreliable for you, Dad, perhaps you'd like to go to an ATM right now. We can get a mini statement. It will show the last few transactions, including the December 1st deposit, and crucially, the payer's account details or a reference that can be traced." Olivia looked trapped, utterly and completely trapped. "This is ridiculous. I am not going to be subjected to this interrogation," she shrieked, her composure finally shattering. "She's manipulating you all." But it was too late. The tide had turned. Dad stood up. "Eleanor," he said to my mother, his voice grim, "where are our latest bank statements? The ones from the drawer in the study." My mother, looking stunned and confused, nodded mutely towards the study. Dad walked out of the room. The rest of us waited in a charged, unbearable silence. Olivia was visibly trembling. her earlier confidence completely gone, replaced by a desperate, hunted look. Nina gave my arm a reassuring squeeze. A few minutes later, Dad returned a couple of official-looking bank statements in his hand. He didn't even need to go to the ATM. The paper trail was already in his possession. He spread them out on the dining table, his finger tracing lines of text. The entire family seemed to lean in, holding their breath. He looked up, his face a mask of dawning horror and disbelief. He looked first at Olivia, then at me. It's true," he said, his voice barely a whisper, yet it echoed through the silent room like a thunderclap. All 6 deposits, July, August, September, October, November, December. The originating account number for every single one of them. It's Sophie's account, not Olivia's. There's no record of any similar payments from Olivia's account at all. The shock in the room was a physical force. Aunt Carol gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Uncle David just stared open-mouthed. The other relatives exchanged stunned, incredulous glances. My mother sank into a chair, her face white. "No," she whispered. "No, it can't be." All eyes were now on Olivia. Her face, which had been pale, was now mottled with angry red splotches. She looked from my father's condemning gaze to my mother's devastated expression, to the shocked faces of her audience, and finally, to me. Her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. I, she stammered, her eyes darting frantically. Then the defiance drained out of her, replaced by a raw, ugly fury. "All right, fine," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "So I didn't make the transfers, so Sophie did. But she never said anything. She let me believe. She set me up. She wanted me to look like a fool. It's her fault, too, for being so secretive, for playing her little martyr games." Now, the sheer audacity of her trying to shift the blame even now was breathtaking. "I set you up, Olivia," I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Or did you see an opportunity when I kept quiet about helping Mom and Dad and you decided to steal the credit? Complete with faked documents to prove your generosity, did you enjoy basking in their gratitude, knowing it was all a lie built on my sacrifices?" Olivia just glared at me, speechless with rage and humiliation. The truth, raw and undeniable, had finally cornered her. There were no more lies to tell, no more performances to give. With a strangled sob of fury, she grabbed her handbag and her coat. "I hate you," she screamed at me, tears of genuine rage now streaming down her face. "I hate all of you." And with that, she stormed out of the house, slamming the front door so hard that a picture rattled on the wall. The silence she left behind was heavy, thick with shock, embarrassment, and dawning regret. One by one, the other relatives, their faces etched with discomfort and a dawning shame for their earlier judgments of me, began to make awkward excuses. "Well, we should probably be going. Long drive back. Early start tomorrow." Within 15 minutes, only my parents Nina and I remained in the wreckage of Christmas dinner. My moment of triumph was complete, but it was a hollow victory tainted by the raw pain of my family's betrayal and the ugliness of Olivia's exposure. The immediate consequences had begun, and they were devastating. The immediate aftermath of Olivia's dramatic exit and the subsequent hurried departure of our relatives was an unnerving, echoing silence. The remnants of the festive meal lay on the table, a mocking tableau of a celebration that had imploded. My mother Eleanor was weeping quietly into a napkin, her shoulders shaking. My father Robert sat slumped in his armchair, staring blankly at the bank statements still spread before him, his face a study in shock, shame, and profound disillusionment. Nina, ever the pillar of quiet strength, began to clear some of the plates, her movements calm and purposeful in the emotionally charged atmosphere. Finally, Dad looked up, his eyes finding mine. They were filled with a raw, unfamiliar pain. "Sophie," he began, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion. There are no words to say how sorry, how incredibly deeply sorry we are." Mum lifted her tear-stained face. "Oh, Sophie, my dear girl." She choked out fresh sobs, racking her frame. "We've been such fools, such blind, terrible fools. How could we have treated you like that? believed her over you, our own daughter, who was only trying to tell us the truth, who was actually helping us. She reached out a trembling hand towards me. Can you ever forgive us? Their apologies when they came were heartfelt. They were raw, steeped in a genuine remorse that I hadn't expected, or perhaps hadn't allowed myself to hope for. It was a significant part of my victory, this moment of acknowledgement from them. I took a deep breath. I appreciate your apology, Mom, Dad. I said, my voice softer now, the anger draining away, leaving behind a weary ache. I really do, but this isn't just about last night or even the last 6 months. This is about a lifetime of her being the sun and me being a shadow. Tears welled in my own eyes, then not of anger, but of a deep old sadness. Trust is broken, badly, and it's going to take a very long time to heal if it ever truly can. Things can't just go back to the way they were. They both nodded, accepting my words without protest. There were no excuses, no attempts to minimize their role. For the first time, I felt truly seen by them, not as Sophie Olivia's less shiny sister, but just as Sophie. It was a strange, unsettling, yet ultimately validating feeling. I agreed to stay for another cup of tea, a fragile truce settling over the room. We talked, really talked for hours that evening, peeling back layers of ingrained family dynamics. It was painful, exhausting, but necessary. I didn't stay the night at their house, though. The thought of sleeping under the same roof where I'd been so unjustly cast out less than 24 hours earlier was too much. Nina, understanding completely, took me back to her place. New boundaries were being tentatively drawn. In the days that followed, the family grapevine, which had so efficiently spread news of my disgrace, now buzzed with the even more scandalous tale of Olivia's exposure. Her attempts at damage control were by all accounts disastrous. She apparently sent a flurry of tearful, blame-shifting texts to our parents, still trying to paint herself as a victim of my manipulation and secretiveness. She tried to rally support from a few of the more sympathetic aunts, but the irrefutable evidence of the bank statements, the sheer brazenness of her faked PDFs, and her hysterical exit had done irreparable damage to her credibility. The golden child myth had not just been dented, it had been shattered into a million pieces. One particularly poignant moment came on Boxing Day. My Uncle Mark, Dad's younger brother, a man I'd always respected, but who had looked at me with such profound disappointment on Christmas Eve, called me. "Sophie," he said, his voice heavy with regret. I owe you an apology. A huge one. I was there when your mother was praising Olivia on Christmas Eve just before you spoke up, and I confess I judged you harshly. I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. Completely wrong. What Olivia did and what your parents, how they initially reacted, it was appalling. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for misjudging you, and I admire your courage for standing up and bringing the truth out. It couldn't have been easy. His words and similar quieter messages of support from a couple of other relatives meant more to me than they could ever know. It wasn't just about being proven right. It was about being seen as right, as truthful. It bolstered my newfound confidence, the quiet strength that came from having faced the storm and survived. Olivia, meanwhile, seemed to have gone to ground. She wasn't answering calls from our parents. Her social media, usually a curated stream of her fabulous life, went silent. The public humiliation was clearly a bitter pill for someone so invested in her flawless image. There were no official investigations into her faked documents. My parents, despite their anger and hurt, weren't inclined to pursue legal action against their own daughter. The family shame was punishment enough, they felt, and in a way, they were right. The social consequences within our extended family were swift and brutal. Invitations to family events would, I suspected, be scarce for Olivia for a long time to come. As for me, a profound sense of relief began to settle in, pushing aside the lingering exhaustion. The weight I'd been carrying for so long, the burden of the secret payments, the injustice of the stolen credit, the pain of being disbelieved, had finally been lifted. I had spoken my truth, presented my evidence, and the truth had against all odds prevailed. Nina remained my steadfast supporter, a true ally. My relationship with my parents was altered. The old dynamics were shattered, and we were tentatively, cautiously trying to build something new, something more honest on the ruins. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. I was establishing new boundaries, learning to articulate my needs and feelings without apology, and they were, to their credit, trying to listen. The immediate storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape irrevocably changed, but one that held the promise of a clearer, more authentic future. A year, 12 months. It sounds like a long time, and in some ways it was an eternity, but in others it passed in the blink of an eye. The sharp edges of the Christmas Day cataclysm had softened, but the memory and its lessons remained vividly etched in my mind, and I suspect in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. My life in that year underwent a quiet but profound transformation. The Sophie who had been content to be wallpaper was gone. In her place was a woman who understood her own worth, who wasn't afraid to take up space to use her voice. That newfound confidence born from the fire of having to fight for my own truth had a ripple effect. At work, I found myself speaking up more in meetings, pitching more ambitious design concepts. My bosses noticed. 6 months after that fateful Christmas, I was offered a promotion to senior graphic designer with a significant pay raise. I even finally bought that new laptop not out of desperate need, but as a symbol of my own success, bought with money I had earned and could spend without guilt or the need to scrimp for others who didn't appreciate it. My relationship with my parents, well, it was a work in progress, but it was work. They made a genuine, consistent effort. Mom called me regularly, not just to talk about Olivia, who was rarely mentioned in our conversations at first, but to ask about my day, my projects, my feelings. Dad, in his quiet way, started sending me articles he thought I'd find interesting or calling just to check in. The favoritism hadn't vanished overnight. Decades of ingrained behavior don't just evaporate, but it was markedly, consciously diminished. They were trying, really trying to see me, to hear me, to value me as an individual, not just as Olivia's sister. Our interactions were more honest, sometimes still a little awkward as we navigated this new terrain, but they were real. The previous Christmas, that awful explosive Christmas, had in its own destructive way lanced a festering wound. Now healing, however slow, could begin. I established firm boundaries, no more being the family ATM, no more tolerating dismissive behavior, and they, to their credit, respected them. And Olivia Karma, as they say, can be a patient, meticulous accountant. Her golden child status within the family was not just tarnished, it was obliterated. Her credibility was shot. The aunts and uncles who had once hung on her every word now treated her with a cool, polite distance. Family gatherings, the few she tentatively began to attend after months of self-imposed exile, were palpably different. The fawning admiration was gone, replaced by a wary scrutiny. She was no longer the star. She was just Olivia, the sister who had lied, deceived, and faked documents. The impact extended beyond the family circle, too. That innate arrogance and sense of entitlement, which had always been cushioned by our parents' unwavering belief in her perfection, apparently didn't play so well in the real world when the props were kicked out from under her. Nina heard through a mutual acquaintance that Olivia had parted ways with her glamorous executive assistant job a few months after the Christmas incident. The official reason was downsizing. But the rumors hinted at issues with her attitude, a lack of accountability, and perhaps even a whiff of her manipulative tendencies being less tolerated by corporate superiors than by doting parents. She found another job eventually, something less prestigious, and from what I gathered, she was finding it a harsh adjustment to be just another employee without her built-in fan club. There was no dramatic downfall, no public ruin in the wider world, but her wings had been clipped. She was learning the hard way that actions have consequences, and that a reputation once shattered is incredibly difficult to piece back together. The faked PDFs, while not pursued legally, became a permanent symbol for our parents of the depths of her capacity for deception, a constant reminder that their golden girl had a core of something far less glittering. the dynamics within our extended family had undeniably shifted. There was a new, almost refreshing honesty in the air at gatherings. People seemed less inclined to gloss over uncomfortable truths, perhaps inspired by the Christmas Day showdown. My relationship with Nina deepened. She was more like a sister to me than Olivia had ever been. My personal growth was the most significant outcome. I learned to trust my instincts, to value my own contributions, and to demand respect, not just hope for it. I was no longer afraid of confrontation if it meant defending my integrity. That Christmas a year later was a quiet affair at my parents' house. Olivia was there, subdued and watchful. There were no grand pronouncements, no dramatic performances. When Mom raised a glass, it was to family and to honesty. She looked directly at me when she said honesty, a small, genuine smile on her face. Dad gave me a new set of expensive art pens just because he'd mumbled, but his eyes were warm. It was a full circle moment, a quiet acknowledgement of how far we'd all come or been dragged in a year. The scars from years of being overlooked and unfairly treated were still there, faint lines on my soul, but they no longer ached with the same intensity. The truth had not only prevailed, it had cleared a path for something better. I felt a profound sense of relief, of vindication, and most surprisingly, a quiet, steady peace. So what's the moral of this roller coaster of a story? For me, it's crystal clear the truth. No matter how deeply buried or cleverly disguised, has a stubborn way of clawing its way to the surface. And equally important, you have to be willing to be its champion, standing up for yourself, especially against those you love or those who hold power over you, is terrifying, gut-wrenching, and one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But letting your truth be silenced, allowing lies to fester and thrive, is a slow poison to the soul. Familial favoritism, stolen credit being disbelieved. These are corrosive forces that can shatter your sense of self. I have to ask you, have you ever had to fight tooth and nail for the truth in your own family or in any situation where the odds felt insurmountably stacked against you? What would you have done in my shoes? If this story resonated with you, if you believe in the power of truth and the importance of standing up for yourself, even when it's terrifying, please like this story. If you want to hear more tales of justice served and underdogs finding their roar, hit that subscribe button. And please share this story if you think it might inspire someone else who is struggling to find their voice or fight their own battle. Comment below with your hometown and let me know if you've experienced anything similar. You'd be surprised how many of us have walked this path. And if you know someone who needs to hear that they are not alone and that truth can prevail, tag them. Never ever let anyone silence your truth or gaslight you into doubting your own reality. Gather your proof, find your allies, even if it's just one person like my amazing cousin Nina, and hold on to your integrity like it's the most precious thing you own. Because it is. You are stronger than you think, and your voice deserves to be heard. You're not alone in these struggles, and together, by sharing our stories, we build a community that champions honesty and justice. Thank you for listening.